Welcome to Listenwise News Bites, where you can hear stories from the news that are specially selected for young listeners. I'm Monica Brady-Meyerov, a public radio reporter and the founder of Listenwise, an award-winning online listening resource used by teachers. We have a curated collection of more than 2,000 podcasts from sources such as NPR and other producers of high-quality audio storytelling. In this episode, a story about reimagining public safety following weeks of protest over police brutality against Black people. Also, it's summer, which means baseball, except during a pandemic. And finally, what does eating French fries have to do with helping the economy? Listen to this weird news story to find out. First, protesters angry over the death of Black and brown people at the hands of police are demanding sweeping changes to policing systems around the country.
Police are often the biggest expense in a city budget, but after the video of George Floyd's death was seen around the world, calls for reforms in defunding police budgets are escalating across the country. Some departments vow to make changes, NPR's Cheryl Corley reports.
When the speakers hit the stage at a rally in Chicago's Union Park last night, their message was clear and quickly posted on social media.
We came here with demands. We didn't just come here to march. You came here to say defund the police. You came here to say Black Lives Matter.
Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot says she's heard the talk about defunding police departments, but when she's talked to people across the city during the tense times of recent weeks, she gets a different message.
What I've heard from people in neighborhoods is that they want more police protection, not less.
For years, city leaders have grappled with how to address police abuse and how to make changes while keeping the public safe. The weeks of protests, the demand for defunding police departments, and the unrest that's left businesses vandalized or destroyed has forced city officials to think about how policing might be different. In Minneapolis, during an emergency meeting yesterday, the city council banned police from using chokeholds and neck restraints. Some city council members tweeted earlier that the police department should be dismantled and replaced with a new model of public safety. Councilmember Steve Fletcher, who likes that idea, says the community has to first weigh in.
To really dig into what helps everybody feel safe, what do we like about our current system, what can we not tolerate about our current system, what can we envision as a future?
Jeremy Travis, a former deputy commissioner with the New York Police Department, sees the whole defunding effort quite differently.
This movement is a blunt instrument to bring about change.
Blunt, says Travis, because it's not specific about what does or does not work in police departments.
So the risk is that the police budget will be cut and you won't get the calls for reform are asking for.
The NAACP released a list of what it wants to see. It includes a use of force continuum for police departments with clear rules for escalation. It calls for citizen review boards to hold police accountable. And each state's Open Records Act would ensure that a police officer's misconduct information or disciplinary history could not be hidden from the public. A coalition of groups in Los Angeles rallied, calling for cuts in the police budget and more spending on health care and community programs. The mayor agreed to cut up to $150 million from the police budget to pay for youth jobs and health initiatives. UCLA history professor Kelly Lytle Hernandez says the dollar amount may not be much when compared to the entire police budget of nearly $2 billion, but she calls it a turning point.
And this is really the first time that we've seen many people across the country, a broad-based support for moving money out of police and prisons and moving it into a social safety net.
Having a safety net is important, but you must have a plan before cutting police funding, says former police officer Peter Moskos. He's a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and says there are plenty of risks without police.
The idea that the community can better handle its own problems, I think people are going to be in for an unpleasant surprise sometimes of how the community will actually take that power into its own hands.
Abolishing police altogether may not be what defunding advocates have in mind. However, as protests continue over the police killing of George Floyd and others, the defunding calls have put more of a spotlight on how law enforcement dollars are spent and how policing could change. Cheryl Corley, NPR News, Chicago.
That story has a lot of interesting ideas about how to think about changes to policing in the future. What do you think are the most important jobs of a police officer? Next, a story about a favorite American pastime, baseball. All games have been canceled because of the coronavirus, but now organizers are thinking about how they can bring back Major League Baseball games.
And now it's time for sports. Or is it? Baseball might be America's national pastime. Should it be an American priority? Major League execs want a modified season to start in July. Some players say not so fast. Howard Bryant of ESPN joins us. Howard, thanks so much for being with us.
Good morning, Scott. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. The governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, has said, quote, the people of the United States deserve to get their pastime back. If a season starts July 4, which is a date we've seen floated, what would it be like?
Well, it would be a split season. It would be a partial season, maybe even similar to the 1981 season that was postponed by the strike. And I guess that you would try to squeeze in as many games as you could. And then if you could do that by July 4th to start the season, you could have a half season as they have done in the past. And you could probably have a full postseason. And still probably end the season on time, so you would be able to start the next season on time. And then you would also be able to accommodate the types of weather that potential World Series teams would be in. It's very ambitious, and I think that what you're seeing here, in addition to Governor Pritzker, you're also seeing Randy Levine from the Yankees referring to it as a patriotic duty on the part of the players. You're hearing the pressure to get on with it from the part of the owners, and there is serious pushback on the part of the players. It's very obvious that the baseball powers that be, such as a super agent Scott Boras, have decided that the baseball lane is going to be America's healer, just like we've seen in the past. However, this pandemic is not the same as trying to keep people's spirits up during a war. This is one of those issues where the players themselves are putting their health and safety at risk just by hopping on the field. And so this is something that's going to be a very difficult challenge to convince the players that it's their civic and patriotic duty to put themselves in harm's way.
I mean, because of what we know so far, there would be daily medical tests, there would be no fans, certainly no fans in personal attendance. Because there, let's say, only half a number of games, there would be only about half the pay. Blake Snell of the Tampa Bay Rays said, quote, the risk is way the hell higher and the amount of money I'm making is way lower. Why would I think about doing that? Now, to the public, especially so many people who've lost their jobs, others who've taken pay cuts, does that just sound like pouting from a millionaire athlete?
Well, it doesn't sound great, and I think that the way that it came out certainly didn't sound very beneficial to the players. It made the players look completely entitled, but at the same time, I don't think the core of his message is wrong, and simply because the issue that we're having here is supposedly one of health and safety. It's not one of money necessarily. It's supposed to be about whether or not you have enough, do you have ample evidence and ample protections for the players? And if that answer is no, then you are essentially choosing profits over safety. And I think that's been the big issue, and you can feel the pressure that the players are starting to feel. They're not soldiers. They're not doctors. They are not on the front lines in this. And so
they're entertainers. I mean, Broadway is going to be closed in September.
Yeah, and I think the real danger here, Scott, once again, is making it sound as though because they're rich, they have no rights. And because they're rich, they're not supposed to care about health and safety and their families and everything else. And because they're rich, they have no opportunity to say anything. And so it sounded bad on the part of Blake Snell, but on the other hand, if we really listen to what he's trying to say, he's saying very similar things to what we're all saying about where we are right now.
Howard Bryant of ESPN, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
That story was from NPR. Some say it's a patriotic duty to bring back baseball, while others say it's not safe. What do you think? Should baseball be brought back during a pandemic? And now it's time for some weird news. How would you like to be told to eat more French fries? That's happening right now in one European country.
Good morning, I'm Rachel Martin. It's a simple request. Belgians are being asked to eat twice the amount of fries at home during lockdown. Because the pandemic shut down restaurants, there is a surplus of 750,000 tons of potatoes in Belgium. So instead of eating fries just once a week, an association of potato producers is asking Belgians to double that. But even I, as a native of Idaho, had never thought to ask, can I have a side of fries with my fries?
Thanks to our partner NPR and to Scott Holmes for our theme music. That's it for the Listenwise News Bites podcast this week. For more stories from the news selected for young listeners, go to www.listenwise.com and sign up for free. And subscribe to this podcast for our weekly shows. Happy listening.